Welcome to the Good.Enough.Shrink podcast. We are your hosts. I am Jenna Chang, a child, adolescent, and adult psychiatrist practicing here in Los Angeles, California.
And I'm Dr. Patrick Kelly. I am also a child, adolescent, and adult psychiatrist practicing in the Los Angeles area.
We are on a mission to demystify child psychiatry and have conversations surrounding difficult topics on youth and adult mental health, but not without a little play along the way. Hello, everyone. Welcome back to the podcast. Summer is right around the corner, so I hope wherever you are, the weather is warming up and nature is showing you a sneak peek of its beauty. So today, I wanted to talk about this idea of the sense of self, which is this understanding that you know who you are and what you're about. You know your patterns, your underlying tendencies, the good and the bad and the ugly parts of you. And in our culture today, the idea of the sense of self comes with words like self-worth, self-esteem, self-identity, self-image, etc. But I'm not so much talking about that. I'm not talking about the importance of yourself, but rather just an awareness that you are some kind of distinct person that's intricately interconnected with your outer world. It's this idea that you have a sense of I that determines how you engage with the world. And the reason this has been intriguing to me recently is that I've come across multiple situations with people, especially young people, who are moving away from being online, and in particular, away from social media. And the more I talk to people doing this, the more it's made clear to me that this is to preserve a sense of yourself that is fading away online. It has something to do with having this gut feeling that being on your phone all day is not good for you. And I think we all can understand at some intuitive level that the instant gratification can lead to insensitivity in the dopamine system and the reward system, meaning that you need more and more and more of it. You can never get enough, and suddenly it's been 3 hours of doom scrolling, and you have no idea what you've accomplished. So I think people are starting to realize that the longer you spend online mindlessly consuming information, the more disconnected you feel with yourself. And I gotta say, with the recent wave of lawsuits against these social media giants, I'm not gonna lie, I love this shift. I mean, no matter what side of the opinion poll you're on, we can appreciate finally bringing light to the hard truth of addiction being imposed upon a young, vulnerable population. We really have to regulate that. So anyway, that's aside. But of course, social media and the information age have their benefits. Personally, I think it's immensely helpful when I'm really interested in a topic. I can get my hands on any psychology or psychiatry text that I want in the middle of the night when I happen to wake up with some intense curiosity about something. The issue, though, is that the information is not regulated at all. So real experts and doctors and specialists are forced to get themselves onto the same addicting platform to counter the misinformation. And I am so grateful for people who are out there with real licenses, advocating for education and sharing well thought out content. But the reality is that these online platforms are still a breeding ground for people who may have alternative motives, like monetary gains that are disproportionate to like a normal livelihood, or taking advantage of a vulnerable population. So it got me thinking about why people are steering away from being online and what's that got to do with our cultural phenomenon, polarization, and why we feel such a strong pull towards something that we can feel is not good for us. I do know that there is a huge influencer culture out there too, and people get inspiration from them. It's all good until there is kind of this danger zone where we can be very quickly convinced. And I think the real reason we're so quick to be convinced and influenced and eventually polarized is that we don't have a good understanding of ourselves. I'm going to say that again because I know it's a difficult thing to hear. we don't have a good understanding of who we are, what we want, and what we need. So when we hear something or see something that sounds good, we jump on it. But if you have a secure sense of self and you understand yourself well, you don't jump onto anything. You pause, you reflect, you sleep on it, and you make a deliberate decision about it. You trust that you have this internal exploratory. But if people don't have a very good understanding of themselves, they might see themselves as either all good or all bad. So, like, if you make a mistake, you think, oh, I'm just a screw up. But if you did a good job, you feel like you're perfect until you make a mistake again, which is inevitable as a human being. And so then you start to think you're a screw up again. So when this sense of self is waxing and waning and unstable, you can easily be influenced by someone who's very loud in the room. This could be someone who is a tyrannical leader. It could be someone trying to sell you something. Who knows? But when we don't have a good understanding of who we are on the inside, we split people and others into all good or all bad because we feel on the inside that we're either all good or all bad. But nothing is ever that simple, especially if you think about the people you love the most. You love them despite their flaws, despite their mistakes and shortcomings. Most of the time, people are striving to be good, but they can make mistakes. And if we're unable to hold this nuance, we're projecting onto others and the world the way we feel about ourselves, which is that we are either good or bad and nothing in between. But, V for Vendetta, if anybody's seen it, that was a great movie for a reason, right? And The Joker was a hit movie for a reason. Because whatever that is considered quote unquote evil or cruel has many layers behind it. You don't simply categorize them as the other. You want to try to understand where that misalignment lies. Why do they seem so evil to you? What values of yours are they going up against? Why are those values so important to you? What's it got to do with your past? What can you learn from it? And how do we move forward with this? Now, that is not to say that we accept violence or war or these horrific things that are happening in the world. It means that we can firmly be against them with composure and compassion. Very importantly, composure, because this erratic, reactionary, impulsive, hateful culture is not conducive to doing anything productive. I do know that a showcase of anger does move things, but ultimately, what is it teaching little kids, right? This uncontrolled, explosive aggression. It is not a long-term solution. So what I'm trying to say is that this deep understanding of our sense of self and who we are is missing from our society as a collective. And the key is to increase our own awareness of who we are and realize that there are so many nuances within ourselves, so then we can project this onto the world and see that people are really different and we can work with that. And that this heterogeneity is what makes the world an open-minded and accepting place. Okay, shifting gears. If you notice, I've been putting the focus on the process, not the content of who we are, but the process of finding out who we are. And this is really important because the content of who you are changes all the time. One year you like the color blue, the next year you really love green. One year you might be a big supporter of a politician, the next year you're not. Or someone you thought was your friend turns out to be someone who holds very rigid ideas that are not aligned with yours, right? So the content of what you find important changes all the time. But the process of how you discover that, how you go about absorbing information and churning out a conclusion, that has to stay consistent. We used to have a process for this, and it was called being bored. So the process used to be that we are presented with some information, or maybe we want something, we desire something, we scrutinize it, we sleep on it, we reflect, and then we revisit. But nowadays, you can just get whatever you want in an instant. You can go down a rabbit hole within seconds. The Reddit threads are notorious for this. And there is no concept of boredom. It is so easily relieved. we used to be able to sit in this uncomfortable, silent boredom until we got creative or we discovered something on our own. And that opportunity is virtually gone with all the accessibility online. There are no speed bumps to our impulsivity. So you might see where I'm going with this. I think we need to bring back this process of pause and introspection in order to create a better world. And in the spirit of introspection, it's very helpful to look back at your development. And it turns out that your sense of self is deeply connected to your relational self, meaning that your early life relationships weave the foundational fabric of who you are. And you guys know, hopefully by now, that I love the history of psychology and psychiatry, so I'm going to get a little bit into that now. About 100 years ago, psychoanalysts began to explore how your character traits develop from your experience with others. Initially, Freud thought your character traits were coming from this biological, instinctual place. He called them drives. So there was like the pleasure principle involving libido, and then the reality principle involving the ego inhibiting the libido. But over the years, psychoanalysts and psychologists began to see that the environment that a person grows up in, so the people around you, the society, the culture, along with the biologically inherent qualities that you have, both build a person's character structure. This is from Erich Fromm. But going back to Freud, what was so great about him was that he was the first to propose this developmental framework of understanding our psyche. We sort of make fun of his stages now, like the oral, anal, phallic, etc. stages, but he really set the precedent for other thinkers to formulate more complicated developmental stages, like Erikson's psychosocial stages, where it's all about a child's interaction with their relational environment to build a sense of identity. So we're talking about trusting your environment, or feeling competent or autonomous, or being able to make connections with people. And then there's also thinkers like Margaret Mahler, who talked about the infant stage, pushing the limits of safety and becoming their own separate person, with the idea of separation and individuation and rapprochement, usually around ages 15 to 24 months. We have Piaget, who talked about how the infant navigates the sensory world to build their cognitive abilities, and Kohlberg, who talked about the stages of moral development, which, by the way, if you ever studied ethics, you might know that the only true way that you learn ethics is to be put on the spot to make a decision about a conflicting situation. So it is literally your engagement with the world and real life situations that build your values, which ultimately define who you are. Meanwhile, object relations theory is really taking off, led by Melanie Klein. And this theory refers to objects, which are simply other human beings, and talked about how babies encounter other human beings and split them into good or bad objects. And over time, there's this realization that the good object is not always good and the bad object is not always bad. And so the ability to integrate the good and the bad into one consistent person sets the grounds for healthy psychological development and secure attachment, rooted in love and acceptance of flaws that are natural to every human being. So all these developmental theories feed back into our understanding of ourselves, because we can ask ourselves the questions, what was happening when we needed to hit that separation individuation milestone? How do we achieve this realization that we can trust the world, that we are competent, that we can connect with people without feeling isolated, that we can perceive, think, decide, and plan, follow through with strategies that we come up with ourselves? When we haven't met these milestones, and by the way, none of us meet these milestones in like a simple chronological timeline. We're always kind of juggling the acquisition of these different milestones. But if we haven't really met them, we may start to question our sense of self. Like, for example, you might ask, Why am I so hard on myself? Why do I idealize everyone else's accomplishments? Or why do I keep repeating the same mistakes over and over and over again? So then here we have to talk about the unconscious. By now, I hope most people accept that there are unconscious processes going on inside of us. Like, just because we can utter something verbally doesn't mean another part of us does not exist, meaning that there might be darker sides of you that you don't want to admit. And even if you're a strict behaviorist or a materialist, you might notice moments in your life when something really resonates with you and you just can't describe it. This happens a lot with music and art and writing and reading and poetry. So I'm hoping that's enough evidence to convince most people that there is an unconscious state of mind, and the striving to understand it is the work in therapy. But why is uncovering your unconscious so important? Well, if you know some aspects of your underlying patterns and tendencies that's buried beneath the surface, you can make a choice about them. Because choice, of course, is by definition conscious, and therefore you have some sense of agency in your life. So how do we tap into our unconscious? Well, the first place to start is to look at something carefully if you have very strong feelings. And it doesn't matter if it's positive or negative, you just don't want it to be neutral. I think we have this urge to ignore strong feelings, especially negative ones, because it's uncomfortable. But I think that also has a lot to do with our surroundings, the people around us, our caregivers, our society and culture. Because when our environment doesn't know how to handle strong feelings, we don't handle strong feelings. So let's bring up an example. Let's say that your friend posted about how they're hanging out with your other friends without you. You feel this strong sense of FOMO. You feel unimportant, forgotten, abandoned. So what does that say about you and your value in relationships, loyalty, being included as part of a group? And the pain is likely eliciting something in your past. So what similar experiences have happened in the past? What do you make of it now? What did it teach you? Another strong feeling is envy. So let's say your friend or someone you know got the job that you've always wanted, or started a project that you've always dreamed of but never had the money for. Envy is a strong emotion that is a gold mine for understanding yourself. And so you can ask the same questions like, why do I care so much about this? Have I been wronged in the past? Have I felt resentment? Am I someone who holds on to things without really knowing? Am I someone who forgives but doesn't forget? When we start to unpack a lot of this in therapy, there comes a moment when I can feel the walls breaking down, and the person decides to trust me. It's subtle, but I can feel it with my whole body, thanks to mirror neurons, I think. But their shoulders loosen, their eyes become soft, they let go of all the tension they've been holding all this time. And what then unravels is their true story, their raw emotions, vulnerabilities, shadows. Sometimes I get really excited when this moment comes and I go too quickly and they close up again and I realize I messed up. But other times I'm too hyper-focused on one thing and I'm too slow to keep up and they feel unheard. So the art of therapy is really getting that timing just right. And there is no textbook for that. But when your true story comes out, sometimes the pain is so unbearable. A lot of people think that therapy is about getting to talk about stuff, but that's like half the work, and the other half is coping with the hard truth. I don't know that there are many texts that actually tell you how to do this coping part, probably because there isn't much to be said except to hold the discomfort and stay centered and explore and repeat. And most of the time, I think it's more about you as a therapist sitting with these feelings and tolerating them through supervision and debriefing. Sometimes it helps to imagine yourself standing on a balance beam and holding the good parts in one hand and the bad parts in the other. And the longer you practice holding them, the better you get at balancing on that beam and be able to move forward. In trying to understand ourselves better, it might be helpful to learn about different ways that people categorize personality styles. I really like the classically psychoanalytic, psychodynamic categorization of personality. So I'm talking about the obsessive personality, the paranoid personality, depressive, narcissistic, schizoid, schizotypal, etc. But honestly, I think any personality categorization is helpful. So the Big Five has been popular these days. This is where you're talking about the level of your openness or agreeableness, etc. And the Myers-Briggs has always been really popular. You can get kind of a snapshot of your personality with whether you're an introvert or extrovert, or if you process information in a logical way or a feeling-based way. And you can even use like astrology or horoscopes, whatever floats your boat. The content, again, doesn't really matter to me as much as the process. The process is that you are thinking and exploring and verbalizing and maybe getting a little confused sometimes, but then coming to a deeper sense of who you are and what makes you you and how you're connected to everything else around you. When you can contain yourself within some level of understanding, you free up space in your mind to allow other possibilities. And this will allow you to create space to be generous and accepting of others, and therefore leading to a truly compassionate state of mind, which is really what the world needs today. So in summary, when you start to feel that there is this overwhelm of information and constant comparison, that you feel so disconnected from yourself, I want to encourage you to take a pause and step back and speak of all of the truths, including really ugly parts of you, and realize that you have a choice in this moment. If it happens to be a really bad day and you just want to succumb to the negativity, yeah, it's happening. But if it's the kind of day where you could go either way, 50-50, and you might decide to choose the positive route, over time, if you do this repeatedly, you can slowly rewire your habitual patterns that you've built over the years, because now you're conscious of it. So in my humble role as a psychiatrist and therapist, it upsets me when the system that we have in place right now fosters such an intense form of isolation. And it's kind of brought upon us like this false medicine to cure our deep insecurities and not knowing who we really are, especially those in power or those in leadership, people who have a lot of influence. When there's no respect to the unconscious process, there is a lack of open-mindedness and collaboration. So I worry about that. But I do know that there are many people out there fighting against it. And so I hope to contribute to this bigger intentional goal of bringing people together, understanding our differences, no matter what side of the coin you stand, and creating unity rooted in respecting individual differences. I know all that sounds very flowery, but I really do think we need to move towards it. And I think it has to start with ourselves. And hopefully, if you do the work, you realize that you're part of this bigger collective. Okay, so that wraps it up for today. I hope that wasn't too abstract, but I've been thinking about this a lot. And so wherever you are, I hope it brings you something to think about as you start your week. Thanks for listening, and I'll see you guys next time.